The invisible cast on for double knitting produces this beautiful edge to your double knitting cast on where the front color just seamlessly flows to the back color in a beautiful edging to your double knitting. So let's take a look exactly how to do this wonderful cast on for double knitting. Hello, this is Jacqueline from Jack Knits, and you may have seen some of my other double knitting videos, which I give instructions on how to do a cast on for double knitting. Now, those other videos show the cast on method, which is fairly simple to do, but it does show the back side color showing on the front side of your work. That may be perfectly fine for some. They kind of like that back color kind of peeking through the front with your cast on, but I've had several people ask to have a video on this method, which has the front color just seamlessly flowing to the back on the edge here of the double knitting, so you really don't see the back side on the front or vice versa. This is called the invisible cast on for double knitting, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Now, it is a little bit more trickier to do this cast on than the other method that I've shown. So if you find that this is too difficult, I would suggest that you focus on some of that other method, watch some of those other videos if you just want a more simpler method. But let's tackle this one today. It is worth it in the end for this wonderful, beautiful, smooth edge. I'm going to show you how to do this cast on with knitting straight, flat, with straight needles, and also how to do it in the round. Now, in the round, there is a couple little extra steps I want to show you to help you be successful in the round, as it is, I believe, just a little bit trickier than doing it flat. So let's start with it doing with straight needles, flat. We are going to just use some basic acrylic worsted weight yarn, and I'm using a US size 8 needle. Now, if you're familiar with double knitting, you know that you need to cast on the double the amount of stitches that you need for your projects, because you're working both sides at the same time. So you need a stitch for the front and the back at the same time. So what you're doing is casting on pairs of stitches for every single knit stitch that you need in your project. So if your project calls for 30 stitches, you're going to cast on 60 stitches or 30 pairs of stitches. Okay, makes sense? So let's begin with casting on for this invisible cast on with some straight needles. I'm going to just start by holding both of my yarns together, and I'm just going to make a simple slip knot here to start. That's just going to help hold my yarns together. This slip knot actually does not count as a stitch. It's just going to be to hold the stitches on my needle to start. In fact, when we are done with our cast on, we are going to unravel this slip knot. Okay, here's how we're going to start. We're going to kind of grab both of these yarns with our pinky and then separate the yarns with our first finger and our thumb. So we've got it kind of in this slingshot formation, similar to the long tail cast on method if you're familiar with that. Okay, we are going to first cast on a knit stitch. The knit stitch is going to be our white yarn in the back here, and the purl stitches that we cast on is going to be the blue. So let's do our first stitch, which is going to be the knit stitch with our white yarn. To do that, we're going to start by bringing our needle back towards you under that first front color, that blue yarn, then up through the middle, back over top of the white yarn, and then underneath both yarns, including that blue yarn, and back up to the top. Now I've just casted on half of a pair, the knit stitch with the white yarn. Now we're going to cast on a purl stitch with the blue yarn. So for that, we're doing the same thing, just backwards. So we're going to start with putting our needle over the back yarn, the white yarn, over top of that needle or that yarn, come up through the center, over top of the blue yarn, and then under both yarns back up to the top. Now there's a blue purl. So we've just casted on one pair of stitches. Now we're going to do that again and again. Let's do it a few more times, nice and slow. So let's do a white knit stitch again, which means we're going to start with our needle over top of the blue, up through the middle, over the white, back underneath the blue, and back up to the top. There's our knit. Now let's do our purl. Start with over the white, up through the middle, over our blue, back around to the top. I'm going to do this a few more times. You can watch it in slow motion if you like, just to get the hang of it. Okay, now let's stop here. I want to just do one more pair of stitches just for my swatch, but I want you to take a look at something before I do this very last pair of stitches. You can kind of see that my yarn is really just kind of precariously wrapped around this needle. There isn't a whole lot holding these stitches in place, and you'll notice that if I drop my hand right here, this last stitch will just become unraveled and my whole thing will just come undone. So I want to kind of secure my last stitch of my cast on so that doesn't happen. So before I finish my last pair, let's just do the first half of that pair by making my knit stitch. Now before I do my last half of that, I want to end with a long tail cast on stitch, which you probably are familiar with, where you go up and around to do your cast on. But if I did that, you see now I've got another white stitch on here, and I actually need to end with a blue stitch. So let's not do that quite yet. Let's first just alternate the position of our yarn. So the blue one now is in back, and I can just do a regular long tail cast on method, which I go up through the thumb, around to the back, and back through that thumb hole. And now I've cast it on a blue stitch, and it is nicely secured there with a nice little knot at the bottom, so it's not going to unravel when I let go of my hand. Okay, now that we've got some stitches on here, we can begin to do double knitting. Let's turn our work over to the side so our working yarn is here. Now I am not going to show you explicit details on how to do the double knitting stitch. If you want that type of instruction, please watch some of my other double knitting videos. I will show you the basics here though. We're going to start by knitting the blue stitch, because now, since I turned my work, now the first stitch is a blue knit stitch, and then the whites are going to be my purl stitches. I hold both of my yarns in my left hand by wrapping it around my finger, and then I just separate the two yarns as they drape over my first finger, so I can pick up either color depending on what I'm doing, the knit or the purl. So let's start by knitting our first stitch, which is the blue stitch. I'm going to knit it and pick up only the blue stitch with both yarns in back and knit that stitch. Now I'm going to bring both of my yarns to the front and purl the white stitch by picking up only the white yarn to purl it. Then I'm going to bring both yarns to the back to knit my next stitch. But let's pause here for a moment, because I want you to pay attention to what this knit stitch looks like. You can see that it is draped over my needle from the left over to the back right, bringing the whole of that knitting facing me to my right. And that is actually a backwards knit stitch. The correct way for that knit stitch to be orientated on the needle is the other way, where you are going into that opening of the hole from the left to the right. So we are going to fix that wrong orientation on this very first row by knitting through the back loop of this knit stitch. That's going to correctly put that yarn on the needle the right way for our next rows of knitting. So let's knit this stitch through the back loop, the blue stitch through the back loop. Just pick up that blue yarn and slide it off. Now we'll bring both stitches or both yarns to the front to do our purl stitch with the white. Both yarns to the back, and we'll again knit through the back loop of this blue yarn. Now we are doing this only on the very first row of knitting, because after this those stitches are going to be corrected and we can knit through the front loop like you normally would. All right, let's do this to the end of this row where we're purling and then yarning back while we knit the blue yarn in front while we purl the white. Now we've come to that slip knot that we started with at the beginning, and I'm not going to want to use that as a stitch, so I'm simply going to take my needle out and unravel it. Okay, so now we can turn our work again, and we can start with our next row of double knitting, and this time our very first stitch is a white stitch, and that's going to be our knit stitch. So now we're going to be knitting the white yarns and purling the blue yarn. But now our knit stitches are correctly orientated on the needle, so I can just knit through the front loop and purl the blue, knit the knit, purl the blue, and you can start to see the rhythm here that we're doing, bringing both yarns to the front and to the back for our knit and purl stitches. All right, here's our last pair of stitches. And now you can just keep going on your way, doing your double knitting, but you've got this beautiful cast on edge that will just seamlessly show one color to the next. So that is how you do it working flat. I'm going to show you next how to do it working in the round. It's a little bit more trickier, so I'm going to show you a couple extra little tips on that. All right, let's focus on doing the double knitting in the round. The cast on for that, it's really the exact same method. We're just going to do a couple little things differently to make it in the round go a little bit more smoothly for you. We're going to start the exact same way we did previously with a slip knot. I'm now using some circular needles, a 16-inch. These would be the size of needles that you would do if you were working a hat in the round, like I am starting here. Okay, so we've got our start here. We're going to do the exact same scenario that we did before with casting on a knit stitch and then a purl stitch. This is the exact same method we did before. I am going to cast on enough stitches that we can comfortably work with in the round. Now, one thing that makes this cast on a little bit more difficulty if you're casting on a lot of stitches is counting them, and that seems like a silly thing, but it is really a difficult cast on to count once they're on the needle. So if you are working many stitches, it's a good idea to just kind of cast on 10 at a time, make a little tick on a notepad or something to keep track of how many stitches you are casting on. Okay, I'm just going to keep going here and cast on the number that we can comfortably work on in the round. All right, I've got one more pair of stitches here to do. I'm going to do that little trick we did previously where I'm doing very last stitch in a long tail cast on stitch to kind of secure that in place. So let's do our knit stitch, and then let's switch our positions of our fingers and our yarn to do a long tail cast on for the last stitch, which is blue. Okay, so far nothing has changed from how we did it with working flat. Okay, so now we've got all of these cast on stitches on our circular needle and we are ready to start knitting in the round. Now normally when you would cast on stitches for working in the round, you would on your very first round join in the round to start making your first row, and you would have your working yarn coming off your right needle and you would join. Now I am not going to do that for this cast on, and here's why. If you take a look at my stitches, whew, it looks like a twisted mess, doesn't it? I mean, you can't really tell which is the cast on side, which is the stitch side. It is just really messy. And when you join in the round, you have to make sure that your cast on edge is not twisted around your needle. Otherwise, you will just have a twisted piece you can't fix. So you can see that this is going to be very difficult to do at this point. So what we're going to do is just knit one row before we join in the round. That's going to give us a base of bulk of knitting where we're going to be easily see which is our cast on edge. We're going to be able to join in the round without twisting our stitches, and it's going to be much easier that way. So instead of working that first row in the round, we are going to work it flat. So let's do that, and this again is going to be the same way that we did it when we knitted it flat before. We're going to, the first stitch is going to be our blue stitch. We're going to knit that stitch. The next stitch is going to be our white, which we're going to purl with both yarns in the front. And then that same scenario with before, where now our knit stitches are on the needle backwards, so we're going to correct that by knitting these knit stitches through the back loop. So far nothing has changed except for that we're knitting this first row flat, not in the round. So we're going to purl that next stitch, knit in the back loop the next. So what if you're thinking to yourself, how can I make sure that I'm not twisting the stitches as I'm knitting them? Because we saw before, it is really a kind of a messy mess on our needles. But you can always tell by looking at what the next stitch is that you need to stitch and making sure that that is correctly in line with your working. So here my next stitch is a knit stitch. It needs to be blue, and I can see that that's the correct stitch. It's that open cave that we're knitting through the back loop. And then our next stitch is white. But what if you come up to the next stitch and you're thinking, oh, the next stitch is a white stitch. I just did a white stitch. I'm supposed to be knitting a blue stitch. That's right. You are supposed to be knitting a blue stitch. So you just need to twist those stitches a little bit. It looks like it just got accidentally twisted over. Just twist it on your needle so that that blue stitch is ready to knit. So you just have to kind of just take a look at what the next stitch is on your needle and make sure that that is correctly positioned to knit. So you're always alternating the colors, and that way you can assure that you are not twisting those stitches on your needle as you're knitting them. Okay, I'm going to finish this row, this first row, and then we're going to show you how to join in the round. Okay, you see that I'm coming up to my last pair of stitches that I'm going to knit. This is the ending of my very first round, where I'm actually knitting it flat, not in the round yet. Okay, so that was our last stitch. Here's that slip knot. Again, we are not going to use that as a stitch, but I'm not going to unravel it quite yet. I'm just going to kind of leave it sitting there. That's going to help secure these last little stitches while we're knitting, connecting in the round first, so nothing comes undone. Okay, so now you can see that I've got much more substantial weight to my cast on stitches, so I can successfully now make sure that everything is not twisted. See how nicely I've got a nice row here? So now I can make sure that I can join in the round by making sure my cast on edge is in the center of my loop here. Okay, so now nothing is twisted. Now I can take my right side needle, which has the working yarn come off of it, and start knitting these first few stitches on my left needle, and that's going to join it in the round. So we can begin to get ready to do that first stitch. At this point, I can release my slip knot, and now I can knit with my very first, just going to position my yarn here, my very first stitch is my knit stitch. That is going to be my blue stitch. That's when you're knitting in the round, we're not changing which is the knit and the blue knit and the purl stitch, because we're always knitting on the right side. So for my knitting in the round here, my knit stitches are always my blue stitches, and my purl stitches are always my white stitches. And now knitting those first couple stitches now has correctly joined me in the round, and now you just go on your merry way, knitting in the round, around and around and around, and that produces this beautiful cast on edge. Now here's one last little tip I want to show you for casting on in the round. So because we knitted the very first row flat before we joined in the round, you will see, and you'll see this as you get a little bit further into your knitting, that you're going to have a little gap here where you join in the round, because you waited one row before you joined. So you're going to have this little awkward little gap. So simply to fix that, when you are done with your project, you can take the tails of your yarn and do just a simple stitching that together at the end. Just just kind of grafting those stitches together. It doesn't have to be really anything fancy, just to kind of connect that little edge if you don't want that little gap there. Okay, so that's how to do the cast on in the round. Again, produces this beautiful effect that, you know, these little extra steps are really worth it in the end. Again, if you want a simpler cast on method, if this was too frustrating for you, because there are some frustrating type of things to get used to, please refer to my other double knitting videos where I show you how to do that more simple cast on, and I'll have the description or the link to those videos in the description below. So thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you like this video and you give this method a try. If you like this, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. You'll receive notifications of future videos all about knitting tips and tutorials. I also do crochet videos as well. Happy knitting, everybody. Thanks for watching.